So, the big question is this: how are ambitious people like us, who don't have a lot of resources, did not go to Ivy League colleges, were not born into wealth, how do we become resourceful enough, use our creativity, our dedication, and a little bit of crazy to bootstrap our way to realizing our dreams? Whether it is launching a new company, launching a new app, or making it to the top of the corporate ladder. That is the question, and this podcast will give you the answers. Please like, share, and subscribe to get new episodes, videos, and other updates. Hi everyone, welcome to this new episode of Bootstrapping Your Dreams Show. And today we have a very special guest, Mitch Russo. Most people know him as the former CEO of Tony Robbins and Chet Holmes Business Breakthroughs International, which grew to more than $25 million per year revenue. Mr. Russo is an engineer who graduated from Northeastern University. Then back in the 80s, when the PC was just started to spread all around the world, he had too much work to do because of his business was flooding by support requests by clients. And so that situation created conditions for an aha moment for Mitch, an idea for business based on certification and education. Nowadays, Mitch's work is based on coaching people and organizations to realize their potential to build a business with a legacy. So welcome, Mitch. We are excited to have you.
Thanks so much. I'm glad that you invited me.
All right. So let's start by, you have a very successful career. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your background and how you got started and your experience in the entrepreneur journey of yours?
Sure. Well, I think most of us are born a certain way. I was definitely born an entrepreneur. And what that translated to is that even as a kid, I was selling candy in school. I'd go buy the candy at the candy store, and then I'd mark it up, bring it back to school, and sell it to the other students. So, we shoveled snow. We sold Christmas cards. I say we, it was generally me. And occasionally I'd bring my sister along. So we would do things, entrepreneurial things, to make extra money because, no kid can survive on 50 cents a week allowance. Yeah. So we had to do better than that. So it was a real motivator for us and for me. And so as time went on, probably my first serious venture was, believe it or not, a rock and roll band. We started a band in high school, and we built that band to the point where we were playing 2 to 3 major gigs on a monthly basis, typically pulling in about $500 a night. And remember, this is going back to 1970. Wow. So $500 back then was a lot of money.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's awesome. So you definitely have a serial entrepreneurship spirit here. Now let's talk about some of the work that you've done. I was looking at your profile, and you have a great book titled Power Tribe: How Certification Can Explode Your Business. So I just wanted to understand that. What do you mean by a power tribe?
Sure. Well, if you look at some of the bigger companies out there who employ certification as a business model, you come up with folks like Intuit, or you come up with, Salesforce.com or Infusionsoft or Lead Pages. All these are companies that looked at their current growth and said, we could do a lot better if we had certification. And so whether they did it right or wrong, it doesn't matter. They just did what they could do. And even an imperfect implementation was able to help someone like Infusionsoft go from something like $6 or $7 million a year in sales to $50 million a year in sales. And the reason it works so well is because what it does is it capitalizes on your best clients. So the idea behind certification is start with your best clients, offer them the chance to build a profession around the work that they have done with you, and a percentage of those folks will step up and say yes. So in a very short period of time, what we do is we teach people how to build certification and then launch it into their community. And once it gets launched and once it starts to really work well, then others who have not been your customers before will join as well. And as a result, then you end up with a much larger sales force generating far more revenue for you and for them. And now they have a new profession and you have a new channel. So the idea behind certification is to build a new channel. The idea behind building a power tribe is the way you treat the people who are your certified consultants. As a tribe, tribes by definition have a leader and have a mission. Well, you, the president of the company, become the leader. The mission is to change the world with whatever product or service that you have. And once you convert folks from thinking about it as a job or a profession to a mission with goals, the effectiveness goes through the roof. And the emotional buy-in is very, very high and participation soars. Yeah. So that's the idea behind certification and how a power tribe would play into that whole process.
That's great. We have a lot of, first-time entrepreneurs and people who are just starting off in their entrepreneurial journey in the audience. So do you think the certification business model can work for them as well? Like if they're just starting off?
No, you're not going to be able to start off certifying anybody because you don't know how to do what you're about to deliver yet. So you would have to wait for that. The book itself, however, has a lot of wisdom in it related to building a business. So while it's a $10 book on Amazon, it makes sense to read a book like that now so that you can plan your business to have certification once you start building the client base.
I see. Now, what are some of the common mistakes that you see people make when they are trying to implement a certification program like this?
Well, do you mean when they start a business or when they're implementing certification?
When they're implementing certification specifically.
Okay. So in the book, I actually cover many of the mistakes that I made. And for the purpose of hoping that if you read the book, you'll avoid those mistakes. But one of the key mistakes that I think people make is not treating everybody the same. Now, you might hear me say that and go, well, of course I would treat everybody the same. But here's an example of what I mean. When I built my first certification program, we had certified consultants come to me directly and say, you need a version of this in Spanish. I speak fluent Spanish and I could translate this for you, and I'd be happy to do it for free. Oh. Well, I said, sure, go right ahead and do it for free. Well, what I just did at that moment in time is without realizing it, I drove a wedge in between everybody else in the program and myself by favoring one of my certified consultants. Yeah. Now, it wouldn't have been a bad thing to say, well, you know what, it's a great idea. Let me put it out there to the entire community and see if maybe we could do somewhat of a crowdsourcing project here, and we'll pay everybody, whatever it is, a small amount or something for getting it done. That's how you avoid the type of problems that most people create by favoring individuals in the program without doing it in a way that alienates everybody else.
Yeah, the good point. So basically what you're saying is, you need to bring the whole community together, and that's the responsibility of the person who has implemented a certification program. Is that correct?
Exactly. Yeah. Your job is to think of yourself as the benevolent king. You still rule the roast. It's still your show, but at the same time, you are able to help others within your community, within your kingdom, and make sure that they're well fed, make sure that they're doing well. If anybody's falling behind, take notice, pull them up, do what you can. Goes a long, long way to building the type of confidence and, I dare say, friendships that come about from a process like this.
Cool. That's very cool. All right. So Mitch, I was checking out your LinkedIn profile, and it has a very interesting quote there. Starting a company is hard enough, but starting the right company that's fully aligned with your purpose is essential to your quality of life, your income, and your legacy. So can you shed a little bit more light on this?
Well, I think many of us have great ideas. say, well, wouldn't it be great if you had, a car that didn't use any fuel that ran on water? And that's a great idea. Of course, you don't know whether it works or not, but you know that it's a great idea. It would be nice, and you'd say yes to that. But the idea of having a great idea versus having a great company is really all about implementation. And if you take the time to plan, and if you take the time to really explore all of the questions related to how does a business work, like how do I fund it? How do I generate revenue? How do I market? How do I sell? How do I create an environment where I can continuously improve the product that we built and build more? So these are the sort of things that when I work with clients, we make sure all this is in place before they go off and head in the wrong direction and spend a lot of money to do that and waste a lot of time as well.
For sure. Now, do you think this is something that a novice entrepreneur sort of tends to make these type of mistakes, or even experienced entrepreneurs, they sometimes miss out on these things?
Everybody makes these mistakes. I've made these mistakes. I had a great idea for a course a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
And I thought it was so good of an idea, I just built the course myself. I mean, I built the whole thing from scratch, and I went to launch it. Turns out that the audience that I selected to launch it in, by definition, has no money. So most of these folks are broke. And even though I had a great idea and I think my product would help them a lot, none of them could afford it.
Yeah.
So as a result, I did not heed my own advice. I didn't do the groundwork. I didn't do the front end research.
Yeah.
I was so excited about the product, I just built it.
I see. So what's the state of that course now? Like, did you pivot, or did you just salvage that project?
Well, what I did, the product itself is still available. I reduced it from $2,000 to $149. And then I was getting people to buy it. But because it's somewhat of an advanced course, I don't get a lot of people finishing it. So people get a certain way through it and they'll get benefit from it. But, it's a course all about coaching. And it's a course about how to create a coaching company. Whereas most people decide they want to be a coach and open up a little business. I'm the coach type of a business. But my course says how to basically become wealthy being a coach. Nobody becomes wealthy being a coach alone.
Yeah.
Being wealthy as a coach means you have a coaching company. And so what my course does is it teaches you all the steps required to build a successful coaching organization.
Cool.
So that's why I said for $149, somebody's going to buy it and go, this is a great course. I got a lot out of it, but I'm not in a place right now where I need to hire more coaches and implement all the extra hiring processes that Mitch talks about in the course, that kind of thing.
Cool. Now, one of the things that entrepreneurs struggle with is sales and marketing, and you've had such a good track record of great success at that. So, do you have any piece of advice that you can share when it comes to excelling at sales and marketing, even when entrepreneurs are just starting off in their journey?
Well, I think there's two types of selling. I mean, there was many types of selling, actually. There's one-on-one selling, where I get on the phone with you and I convince you to buy my thing, and you relentlessly pursue you until you say yes, and then you give me a credit card, and now I'm going to do something for you. That's one type of selling, and that requires a lot of skill. The other type of selling, which also requires a lot of skill, is to build a selling system which generates leads that flow to a sales organization or a sales page, and then have either that page convert those people or have a team of salespeople trained and scripted to convert those people. So we all start out by doing it by ourselves, and eventually we come to realize that we're probably not getting as many closes as we could. And so at that point we seek help. And as I said before, there's many ways to sell, but the best way to sell is to basically appeal to a person's needs. So before I ever try to sell anything to anybody, I want to interview them first and find out where they're hurting, what's wrong in their company and in their life and in their business, and how I could possibly help them or fix that.
That's cool. Yeah, that's exactly aligned with what we do here as well. Like I'm a big proponent of doing thorough market research and providing the solutions that actually sell in the market. Moving on, I read this about Time Slips Corporation that you founded with only about $5,000 in investment. And you sold it when it reached about $10 million in sales. So that's one of my favorite topics, and it aligns with the title of the show, bootstrapping. So will you say that bootstrapping is still feasible in this day and age for entrepreneurs?
More so than ever. It's never been easier. You could bootstrap without a computer. You could bootstrap with an iPad.
Yeah.
I mean, it really it's basically all about what you want to do. And if you have the determination and the energy and the skill, even if you don't have all the skills, but you have enough of the skills, then you could just about bootstrap anything.
Cool. Awesome. Now, before we go any further, can you share a few anecdotes, or what was it like working with Tony Robbins and Chet Holmes? They are legendary in their fields as well. So it'll be good to know a little bit about how it is like working with them.
Sure. Well, I was the luckiest guy ever to have two coaches, Chet and Tony, at my side whenever I needed or had a question. Now, Chet and I had been dear friends for many, many years, and we were, one text away from each other all the time, and we were constantly talking and texting. Tony, in the beginning, I had less of a relationship with, but as the process grew, as we kept building the business, Tony and I got much more involved in day-to-day activities. So the only thing I would tell you is that both of them have been very successful in their lives. Both of them are what I would call tough operators. They are hard on people, but determined to get it done. Chet more so than Tony. Tony is not hard on people the same way that Chet was hard on people. Tony is hard on people because he demands so much from them. Chet was hard on people like many traditional CEOs. If you didn't do something he liked, he'd tell you whether you liked hearing it or not. So, and honestly, I had to deal with that. But more importantly, my job was to take that, translate it, and then share it with the organization in a constructive way so it didn't alienate others who worked for us. But they were great people to work for. I loved my time. I've worked with Tony since then as well. One of the things that I developed as a skill was the ability to mount and scale large campaigns, radio campaigns in particular, and not only just place the media on radio, but get the best prices, get the best placement, and then create the sales organization behind those radio campaigns. So I've done that again for Tony, and I've done it for clients as well.
That's great. So do you think radio still works today as well?
Well, actually, that would be like asking me if direct mail still works. I mean, there was a period in the early 2000s when people were getting sick of direct mail because so much of it was arriving in your mailbox every day. Eventually, it pretty much stopped. Nowadays, just about any piece of direct mail I get, I'm going to read.
Really?
So little of that coming. And more importantly, I always saw direct mail as a way to learn how other people are approaching a sale. I happen to like direct mail. I've written about that in my blog. But at the same time, the same mistake is now made about radio. Most people think radio is dead, but most people don't realize that radio touches 90% of the US population every week.
For sure.
Radio has morphed and shifted and changed. It used to be AM and FM. Now, AM, FM, satellite radio, podcasts, telephone transmission-based radio. There's so many different types of radio. There are private radio shows that you sign up for and pay for that reach thousands of people. All of that is possible when you decide that radio is a way of reaching people. There is no other medium that works better than speaking directly to another human being. And that's what radio promotes.
That's great. Interesting. Very interesting. All right. So now you are a big advocate of thinking about the business as a way to help other people. So can you share with us how can we go into like a capitalist venture where, you know, the motive is to make money, yet we want to be able to help people? How do we align these objectives?
Well, the way you said it, it would not be aligned. So we go into business to make money, and yeah, we probably want to help some people too. So that to me means that you're going to go about the traditional way of either starting, building, or running a business. And there's nothing wrong with that. If you have an objective to help people, build it into the business model. Make it part of what you do just in doing business. Now, as you know, there are many companies now that do that, like Tom's of Maine gives away shoes to every person who buys. So they give away shoes to the poor for every person who buys a pair of shoes. So that means that they're probably giving away millions of pairs of shoes to the poor every year. Bombas does the same thing with socks. They're giving away a pair of socks for every pair that they sell. I mean, their socks are expensive. They're wonderful socks, but they're expensive. It's like $10 a pair. So they can afford to do that and still make a profit. So, but it took understanding that in advance to make sure that they had the margins necessary to be able to give those socks away. Now, as a result, that's one of the fastest growing companies in the United States right now.
That's cool. Great. All right. So in some of your books, you emphasize the act of creativity, the need to create a culture, create a community. Can you share more wisdom about this? When you say create a culture, create a community, how do we go about doing that, and what are the benefits of doing it?
Well, do you know what the definition of the word entropy is?
I believe so. I know the scientific definition.
Okay, so entropy is when you place something into the real world, and over time it decays and it is destroyed by just the movement of the planet and the movement of people, and just by leaving it alone, entropy takes place. Sure. So if you put an apple on your front porch and you left it there, weeks or months later, it would be nothing but mush and attract a bunch of ants. So the thing is that when you create a company or you create a group of people, like a certification program, and you don't create a culture, then entropy takes place. And before you know, people are fighting with each other. They hate the company. They're quitting. They're protesting. And it turns into, basically a stinking mess, just like that apple would have been. Instead, what you do is you create a set of boundaries. So what is freedom? Freedom is the ability to do anything within a set of boundaries. So we are all free human beings. We can do anything as long as we observe the law of gravity. I mean, and of course, if we observe the law of gravity and learn to fly, that's great too. But gravity is part of the way that we must live. There's good things and bad things about gravity. Same thing with any group. Without a set of rules and a structure, a framework to work within, entropy takes place, and eventually things will decay and deteriorate to a place where you don't want them. So I say, why not start with that code of ethics, with that culture plan, and install that culture directly into this community even before you begin it.
Cool. That's great. All right. Now, there's another interesting concept that you talked about, which is the invisible organization. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. So after working with Chet and Tony for 5 years, you may know this, Chet passed away.
Yes.
And he died of complications related to leukemia. And I had really at that point been emotionally exhausted. I lost my best friend. I was with him the day before he died in the hospital. I had the last conversation he ever spoke on this planet with me.
Wow.
And I basically was completely depleted at that point. And I spoke to Tony and I said, Tony, I would really like to take a break. I think I'm going to resign. And we chatted about it, and he advised me and said, I see why you want to, and I think it's a good time for you to do that. We'll take it from here. And so at that point, after I resigned, I said to myself, well, I don't know what I'm going to do next. I'm just going to chill out. And I did. I chilled out for about 3 months. And then I started calling some friends and asked their opinion of how I might take my next journey, whatever that might be. So I called my friend Jay Abraham, and I said to Jay, I don't know what to do next. What do you think I should do next? And Jay said the one thing that motivated me to actually take the steps and write the book, The Invisible Organization. He said, Mitch, you cannot deprive the world of what you know. You must find a way to communicate what you know to the rest of the world, or build another company, or work with someone else and build another company. But you can't just keep all this knowledge to yourself. And I said, yeah, you're right. And with that, I started to make notes about what I actually did know, because I didn't even quite know what I knew until I started to write it down and collect it all into a form of a manuscript.
Yeah.
And it was very hard because, with writing that book, I was saying goodbye to Chet at the same time. So the book is a blueprint. It's basically how to build a virtual organization, either from scratch or starting with a brick and mortar company and evolving it to the point where it could be wildly profitable without infrastructure. And what I mean by infrastructure, no buildings, no copy machines, no phone systems, nothing. All you have are people and the internet. And if you have people and the internet and you have software as SaaS-based platforms, you could do anything.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's great. And it's amazing how it aligns so well with the concept of bootstrapping and doing things in a lean and mean fashion. So that's great. Now, there's another interesting concept that I want to talk about is unconscious competence that you call is a key for your business plan. So can you shed a little bit more light on that?
Sure. Well, most people, when they're starting out, may or may not know what they're really, really good at. They may know things that they like to do, but they may not know exactly what they're really good at. And the way to find out is you could look at a person and you could watch them, and even in amazement, watch as they do something, and then say to them, how'd you do that? And the key here is if they say, well, I don't know, I just do the same thing all the time and, I get what I get. Well, that means that person is operating from unconscious competence. And instead, what you want to do is you want to try to unpack that and help a person not only understand it better, but evolve it so that it actually grows and becomes even better than it was before. And when you unpack unconscious competence, it's like finding buried treasure, because not only do you get to explore what you already are and have, but you also get that moment in time, the opportunity to teach it to others as well. So that's why I'm a very big fan of unconscious competence, because it has the ability to show you what your true gifts are and how to expand them.
Cool. Yeah, that sort of ties everything together, because you are trying to figure out what you knew, what you had in your mind, and you put it down on paper and then shared with the world at large. So that's great. All right, Mitch, it has been such a great pleasure to talk to you, such an honor. And thanks a lot for sharing all your experience and wisdom. Now, before I let you go, can you tell us a little bit about your company and what you do and how you work with other entrepreneurs and help them?
Yes. Yeah. So what I've done now is my world has evolved to the point now where I only work with a few CEOs and only on long-term programs. So what that means is that when I work with a company, I generally don't work with beginners. And I say generally, I'll make an exception on occasion, but I generally don't work with beginners. I work with people who've already reached a certain amount of success, but really want to step on the gas and take it to the next level. And we enter into a relationship where I coach them actively for a year, and sometimes 6 months, but it's generally a year. And it's with that type of a relationship that I'm able to take a company and get them to double and triple in that year, where they may not have been able to grow more than a few percent year after year before that. So those are the type of relationships I'm looking for on one hand. To complement that, I also build power tribes for my clients. So right now I'm working with several clients who hired me to create a power tribes program for them. So the one thing I'll say about that is that it's very expensive. And if you want to work with me at that level, it's about $100,000. I also have a mastermind that will take people and in 3 days, 3 to 4 days, give them all the tools they need to build their own certification program with my help. And that's a fraction of the price. But you have to qualify before you get in. So if someone is interested in building certification, they don't have $100,000 to hire me directly, but they still want to get it done, well, they should join my mastermind for a fraction of what I normally charge. They'll get all the same information and my coaching within the group that we set up, within the group structure that we set up.
All right, great. Thank you so much, Mitch. Once again, it has been a pleasure having you on the show, and just learning from you and from your experience. Thanks a lot.
My pleasure.
Thank you. So again, I'm Manuj Aggarwal, and thanks a lot for joining us on Bootstrapping Your Dreams Show. And now, if you are an existing or an aspiring technology entrepreneur, then I invite you to check out my new online workshop, Bootstrapping Your Tech Startup Dreams. Go to go.tetranoodle.com/boot-podcast and sign up for free. I want to make sure more successful and sound decisions are made every day in your tech projects. Let's start finding solutions to your problems. So go to go.tetranoodle.com/boot-podcast, and I look forward to helping you with your tech startup.